Ma tutvustaks siis kõigepealt Levald Siseministeeriumist, planeeringute osakonnast ja Teele Pehk linnalaborist, meie kõigi tubli linnaaktivist. Ja siis Ewa. Ja mina olen Yoko Alender endiselt. Just introducing the people. So let's start. Is there anyone who has some questions? Yes, Mary.
Actually, I was going to make a statement because of I live in New York part-time, and I watched the transition. Yeah. And the other thing that it did also to New York is it separated moving traffic and people who wanted to linger. And actually it cut out transportation time for people like myself who walk and take a bicycle. So that was, in my part, one of the best things that happened to New York. Wow, thank you. So I just
Ühesõnaga siis Mary, kes elab pool aega New Yorgis, kommenteeris ja kinnitas seda, mida Ewa siis sellest Times Square'i muudatustest tutvustas, et see tõesti tegi liikumise aja lühemaks, sai kiiremini ühest kohast teise ja et see oli üks parimaid asju, mis New Yorgis viimasel ajal toimunud on. Aga publikust on veel midagi küsimusi.
Can it be done here?
Yes.
Do you think it can be done here?
It should be done here.
And fast.
Yes.
And fast. So we should.
So I think to comment or to put it in a local context, I think we are in the beginning of this also this change of thinking that you also mentioned. And I think on a very sort of root level, we are starting to demand for this better living environment. I think also we have a few people here who represent this sort of root level action. We have Teele, who is from Linnalabor, who I think all these organizations in Tallinn in the different areas, basically all of them have come up because they need to, they want to make some changes in their local environment. And also, for example, we have Mari, who is from the cyclists, sort of, there is this project of making Estonia more bicycle friendly. And I think on the root level, we have this readiness, or we are ready to change our culture. But now it's just also we need to change this top level, sort of. We need to have the political decisions that we will go this way. And on this part, maybe I think at the moment the planning department in the ministry is also part of this trend. I think they are trying to or starting to think in these lines. Would you comment on it maybe a little bit?
Raske on siin öelda midagi lisada sellele väga heale ettekandele, mida Ewa pidas põhimõttelist, aga mis puudutab nüüd seda põhimõtet, mis kandma jäi, et kõik on inimestele, kõik on inimeste jaoks, siis ka planeerimine on tegelikult inimeste jaoks, kelle jaoks siis muidu. Ja kui need põhimõtted, mis on mitte ainult üldistena välja toodud, vaid väga heade näidetega, et ühest või teisest linnast, kus on ta kiiremini või aeglasemalt sündinud, siis Tallinnas tegelikult sünnib samuti. Kui me tuletame meelde septembri algust verepuiesteel, samasugust interventsiooni linnaruumi, kus nagu anti inimestele autode arvel paariks päevaks võimalusi, siis täpselt sama see toimus tegelikult juba teist korda. Kahjuks küll ilm seekord ei soosinud, aga tegelikult see on kohal. Või siis ka uue maailma päevad. Kõik need üritused on tegelikult selleks, et inimesi tuua tänavale, sest tänav ongi inimeste eluruum, välisruum, kus peaks inimesed veetma märksa rohkem aega, kui nad praegu seda teevad. Kui Yoko vist eile Facebookis pani üles ühe mõtte, et miks peaksid inimesed välja tulema, kui neil on internetis palju rohkem midagi teha. Et tõsi ta on, aga selleks tegelikult peamegi vaeva nägema, et inimestel võiks just nimelt väljas midagi teha ja et nad elaksid vähem virtuaalselt ja rohkem reaalselt.
Do a short run-up for you. That he thinks also we are on this trend, and it is happening on a root level basis. We've had an action by the younger people in the Architects Union, a 2-day project in the main street, taking away space from the cars and filling it with like ping pong tables, benches, like activities for people. So it is a coming thing, and also to sort of fight a little bit against, to invite people to be in the streets, which is the normal environment for them, instead of only being in the internet, basically. And but I also wanted to, I'll do it because I think we have people who understand English, so we can continue maybe in English. Yes. Oh, okay, Teele, please.
Yeah, I also want to comment that we need this thinking on the decision makers level. I think it's slowly coming already. I've met some skeptical small young girls here in Tallinn as well on the top level. A few days ago I was in a workshop concerning the harbour area. And the harbour area, like the central seaside in Tallinn, it's cut off. You cannot access it unless you go to the boat. So they are thinking there thinking for years already, how to open it just for pedestrians, just to experiment, do a pilot project in a way, and to connect the existing promenades or these biking paths that are existing around this harbour area, just by painting something. Or, well, I told them that let's go out and let's start painting, because the space is there. We can just shift some gates or open the gates, and it's easy. Come on, why do we have to discuss for hours here inside? And, well, basically, yeah, something will happen. Something like things are happening. And when I mentioned that, yes, this Gale's philosophy that when there are very skeptical landowners and these big business owners, and yes, but where do we put the cars? And then like all the businesses, they need car access as well. And I was like, well, it's proven already that if the speed of the street is lower, then it's better for small businesses and everything you said. And then the main architect of Tallinn was like, yes, this is true. Teele is telling the truth, and we know that this is good. So there are small shifts. We can also see some red paint on our car streets as well for bikes. It's very fractured at the moment still. This is not, especially in the center, it's very difficult to bike. What we need, yes, we just have to do it. We have to conquer the bus lines and to get the right to ride on the bus lanes as well. I don't know, let's go out and start doing it.
I think still we need a little bit of a wider vision, in that sense that we need to do a bit more on the same time. We need to actually, or at least how I see it in an ideal way, we sort of take the area we focus on, because we can't do all of Tallinn, of course. We focus on the inner city where you can live without a car. And we invite, for example, Gale architects, and together with the local sort of knowledge, make this plan of how to do and what we set as our goal, which percentage we want of each transport mode. And we also need to invest a lot in this education and in this software you were speaking about, because I think all of us probably agree. That's why the discussion is maybe even a little bit hard to foster, because we all agree, we all think this is how it should be done. But I think in the general public still we face a lot of this. You were also talking about, you see it in every city, that we love our cars and the businesses won't boom. So I think it's a lot about information. Yes. Yeah, and the climate, exactly. All these issues, and I think that we shouldn't be so naive that we think that we just need the hardware, sort of. I think we have a lot of problem with the software as well.
Can I say something more? I think Tallinn is very full of potential, because Tallinn is not ready-made. Like this is not a well-designed, like this square here. Like, there are very few places like that, unfortunately, sorry. So there's so much potential for temporary use, for different like inspiring places that you can define the function for yourself.
It's a little bit like Christchurch after the earthquake.
Bombing.
Still.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. And the Capital of Culture year in Tallinn in 2011, we were the European Capital of Culture. It proved that we usually are very afraid of the private land, or there are these fences, but that year proved that it doesn't matter. People who use the space, they don't care if this is a private land, where it ends, where the public space starts, it doesn't matter. And we don't need to design very fancy public spaces so that people can just linger and just stay there. We can use all the space that is around us. We had this Urban Installations Festival, and it's very much focused on the central seaside, which is a wasteland, and which is very often a like closed off area, that we don't sense that we are a sea town.
Also, I want you to, Ewa, to comment maybe a little bit the New York story. Of course, it looks great, but would you maybe bring out like a few of the biggest problems? Because I'm sure there was a huge amount of problems also doing these crazy things.
Well, I think that one thing that was discussed a lot was a fear of blowback. You know, we had lots of strategies, for instance, for creating a better bicycle network or a bicycle strategy, because it's a perfect city for bicycle. It's dense, it's flat, you know, you have so many people within bicycling distance. But because there already was a great conflict, not only between bicyclists and car drivers, but bicyclists and pedestrians in particular, they were very scared of pushing that too hard, because they said that it's really important that what we do now, the first step needs to be a success story. Because we risk having what they call them blowback, where people would turn against this and not wanting any change. And I think that it's important to find, you know, the low-hanging fruit. Where can we do something that we think is going to be a success? And then connect those so that whether it's a temporary thing, that it doesn't become a temporary thing, but it's part of a long-term strategy. It's part of not one thing, but more acupuncture issues. Because I think we need to lift these temporary and local initiatives on a higher level. We need to see them as more important than sometimes we look at them as, yeah, that's great, you do all these things, so we don't have to do anything. You know, and in New York, just going through with that particular project was, of course, I mean, in every, whether it's government or municipality, there are a few Mr. or Mrs. No people. And I think the key in this case was to find what's in it for them. What can then they gain out of this transformation? How can they actually change their mindset? It was all about changing mindset. And Janat Sadikan, who ran Department of Transportation, and the city of New York is not divided in different municipalities. It's one municipality. So I think she has, 10,000 people working for the Department of Transport. She said that this is like a tanker, like this boat tanker. It's really takes a long time to shift course. But if you can just make like a few degrees shift, it will start to turn. So it's a matter of also, I mean, again, who's driving the boat, but I think it was also a project that was managed very carefully by the city itself, knowing who to talk to at what time, not to get this blowback. Not even, I mean, there were so many points in the project where it could have been killed before even being realized. And they were very street smart about it. They had media contacted before. They had all the key players. They talked to all the key players, sort of prepping them and making them be part of the boat. So if it didn't succeed in the best way, they would have been part of the boat. So they would also have been sort of part of responsibility. They want making them wanted to succeed as well. So of course there were lots of issues that came before it. In terms of bicycling then, that was too hot of a potato for Bloomberg to just push for. They have done a lot of, I mean, they increased the amount of bicycle lanes, like painted lanes in New York with I don't know how many miles, so many miles, and it started to be visible, but it's still a dangerous place to bicycle. They have now a few segregated or separated bicycle lanes, but it's not a network yet. So there they said, we won't do the hard streets first because we're afraid again about this blowback. We'll do every street we can do something. And if it's a painted line, it's not sufficient, but it's a first step. And people might just visibly see that something has happened. And hopefully more people will start to bicycle and that culture will grow and we can start do the hard streets. The one we know will be a big fight about because they are congested from the start. There are lots of interests that would be part of it. So I found it really a very, very big learning experience to be part of that process. In Copenhagen, if you would take away a few parking spaces, we don't do it really well from the start, like finest concrete or the best benches, the nicest tree, we'll have that blowback still in Copenhagen. We need to have really high quality public space to show that this is space for you. In New York, that wasn't the case because it's a different context. It's just about doing everything you can possibly, and that would add up because they had this strategy. Again, linking a lot of acupuncture, a lot of initiatives together. If they're separated, they don't show, they don't... Yeah.
We are scared of everything too here, which you didn't actually mention in your otherwise truly inspiring presentation was how did it start in Copenhagen, like accident-wise? Because I'm scared of buses, cars. I'm checking, is my bike still out there? I'm scared of those tram lines. I was in Amsterdam twice this year. I was like scared to death all the time because all the cyclists were so brutal, so super fast there. I'm waiting for my first accident with another person with bicycle. I don't know how to get over all this.
Well,
too many fears.
Well, with the Copenhagen story, it's almost like I don't want to say it because there was never a big plan. It was actually a few key people in the municipality. One was a city engineer who shared this vision and this view of changing the city. So what they did every time there was construction work in the digging up a pipe or something in the road, they put in a bike lane. But they had this sort of undercover vision or strategy that it was never politically approved in the start. But then, so in that sense, it wasn't like a grassroots movement, but it was within the municipality. So maybe you have a few people that can start this inside-out trend. But I think, there are other examples of cities that have much more of a strategic, vision approach, and it's also politically approved. Like New York was also politically approved, even though they tried it first and then approved it. So there are different ways, but Copenhagen was actually a few key people that actually were part of the actual transformation of streets, and they just started it. And then what they did was again document. When we documented as with public life, and we suddenly had data, and I think also again with all these grassroots initiatives that you have in the city, try to find a way to document it, to actually make them tell the story about what difference it makes to do this or not do it. Because I think those figures meant a lot. Those data on people made the politician finally realize this is a good thing.
I am always amazed. Of course, you have done it for now 30 years, even longer, 40 years. How well they have also researched the financial side. it's always so important to have these figures if you ever go to politicians. I mean, it all puts it in context to them. So it's that's why I've always looked up to the Danes and looked into their investigations. That of course it's very hard. You can't do it looking just in the future, which you don't know anything about. You can do it based on the experience. So, but probably it was still, I think, in Copenhagen also very important that you had Jan Gehl, who actually spent his life doing this thing. That you had this sort of pioneer. Yeah.
Ütleksin siia paar sõna eesti keeles vahele, et kui Kopenhaagen võib vaadata sellele 40-aastast ajalugu tagasi, et Tallinnast tegelikult, kui vaadata tagasi rohkem kui 40 aastat, kui vaadata üle 100 aastat tagasi, siis oli Tallinn veel sellises mõõtkavas, et liigutigi jalgsi ja polnudki probleemi. Noh, see asi läks käest ära kuskil 19. sajandi lõpupoole, kui Tallinn kasvas tegelikult aastast kiiremini kui nõukogude ajal. Isegi see protsenti oli see juurdekasv kiirem ja selle tõttu 1913 ehk täpselt 100 aastat tagasi sündiski Suur-Tallinna planeering Eelile Saarisõma, mis baseerus sel ajal juba Euroopas küllalt levinud põhimõttele detsentraliseerimisest ja sellest, et inimestel peab olema võimalus liikuda jalgsi töö ja elukoha vahel või siis kasutada ühistransporti, antud juhul oli see mõeldud just rööbastransporti ning samuti viibida haljasaladel, sest et nagu juba Euroopas 19. sajandi keskpaigast peale lihtsalt linnad olid kasvanud selliselt, et rohelus oli linnadest välja tõrjutud. See tähendab tegelikult seda, et linn ongi üks võrgustik. Linn on võrgustik erinevatest võrkudest, kus on siis nii rohealade võrk kui ka tänavate võrk, autotranspordi liikumises kui ka jalgsi liikumise võrk ja need võrgud peavad olema selliselt üksteisega seotud, et inimesele tekiks linnas ka eluruum. Ja palju rohkem kunsti polegi, ainult et see kunst on väga raske jälle uuesti ellu viia ja meelde tuletada. Et praegu me oleme selle keskel, me püüame näidete kaudu näidata, et ka teistmoodi on võimalik, ainult et kui võtta nüüd planeerimist veidi laiaulatuslikumalt, siis me peame õppima planeerima selliselt, et me ei tekitaks lisa autotranspordi vajadust. Et meil olekski nagu detsentraliseeritud või siis ühistranspordiga ühendatud elu ja töökohad.
Well, we ended, Andres, he taught a little bit about the history and how in the beginning of the 20th century we had this great Tallinn plan where first this idea of decentralization came in, and now when we come look at today, we should also in generally in planning focus on not creating more need for car travel. That would be the point. Maybe some questions. Someone has come to something. Yes?
Okay, I ask that you spoke a lot about examples how to improve the public space, but what did you actually do for the car drivers? Did you do anything somewhere else?
In the New York example, what's interesting is that these changes along Broadway, because it wasn't closed for traffic, through traffic all along Broadway, but just in pieces, like public spaces in pieces. Because the mobility system became simpler. You know, there was simpler crossings instead of having Broadway, Avenue and Street, etc. in every junction. The ironic thing is that travel speed increases. I mean, it was a win-win thing. So even for cars, this was better because also they had a shift for more walking and bicycling. So in that case, there was actual square meters taken away from traffic, but simplifying the logistics of the city made traffic flow better. So sometimes I think a solution it's not about either or, but it's about coexisting, I think, and realizing that the space is for everyone. We just have to divide it in a fair way, and acknowledge that not everyone can walk or bicycle, not everyone will take the bus, but if you can give people a choice, then I think it sort of also naturally evens out some of those really critical issues that usually projects start out with a fight. You know, it's my space. No, it will be worse for us and it's better for us, etc. But you see the most complicated traffic systems sometimes taking up huge amount of space, and the only benefit from the very complicated system is that you can move maybe quicker through, but not necessarily have more cars through space. There's so many ways of looking at it.
But I think we need to be sure that we don't want to make more cars go through there. I think if we start on a project like this, we believe in the fact that if they just could, if it was convenient, if it was easy, if it was quick, a lot of people would choose the bike or would choose the local public transport. But you wouldn't have to spend most of your family's budget on owning 3 cars living in the city center. It's totally crazy. It's just spoiling your resources. You could probably get along with one at least.
I mean, the whole idea is, of course, that you shift people from cars to other modes of transportation, which would eventually lead up to that if you are in a car, you will get through the city, which you might not.
We had some hands in the audience, yeah. Mary.
I was going to just add to that double comment, just because New York brought city bike in, so we got the bicycle, and everybody was really concerned about the traffic with bicycles. And I'll add just one thing. When you said bicycles are more dangerous in New York, I totally disagree. Try driving a bike in Paris. The great thing about New York taxi drivers is they're highly aware all the time of pedestrian movement. But when the bikes got put in, a tremendous amount of people stopped taking taxis, like myself. Because I would take a taxi to go downtown to uptown or to a meeting. Now I just jump on a bike and roar, and you can park them anywhere. So it's actually decreased traffic jams. And so actually I think that other modes of transportation are very important to improve transportation for people who do need to commute in cars.
Yeah, I think I wasn't clear, but it wasn't that there was more traffic flow, it was just a better flow
of the existing. And you guys were mentioning like weather, and it seems that you always blame the weather. And I was living in Canada that has very aggressive winter like Estonia. They didn't seem to have use that as a rationalization or an excuse. So I'm wondering why you guys use that as a rationalization and excuse.
I'm afraid here in this local we don't.
Other people in Tallinn will do.
We are the good ones, you know.
we just drink more.
Yes. No, but I think that's the part, the educational part. I was also thinking about Alari's comment on these fears. I think always you can conquer fears only with education. I mean, you need to know your rules, your biking rules. We need to teach the kids how to drive. But of course, today it's very hard because they can probably only drive in the park because the mothers don't allow them. But why they drive so fast in Amsterdam? Because they all know the rules. They don't have this fear. I think that's probably a lot of this, and also this parking system. I think that's one of the hardest points at the moment in Tallinn. There is no place to park safe with your bike. It's really a big problem. Even maybe a bigger problem than finding a place where to ride. It's this parking and parking safe.
I think safety for bicycling is a key thing. We worked with a few cities that have managed to pop up bicycling to maybe 2%, 2.5%, but not until they built the separated bicycle lanes, they could actually increase that. Because I think you can get people that dare to be part of traffic, like yourself, to bicycle, but you wouldn't get a kid. You wouldn't get grandma out there unless it's very safe. Yeah. So, yeah.
I have a question regarding London. Do you happen to know how happy they are with their coexisting bus and cycling lanes?
Yeah, we saw, I just explained a little bit, we saw in London a lot of these, I know it's not all of them, but very many of the bus lanes are very clearly marked that it is for bikes and for buses. It actually says bikes, buses.
I don't know how happy they are, and I think you brought up Paris as well. They launched their big bike share program, and it was on the bus lanes you were supposed to drive. I don't think it's a long-term solution that is very good, and especially not if you don't have a very good, a lot of really careful bus drivers that want you to be in the lanes.
And electric buses, not smelly diesel.
Yeah. So, but I couldn't tell you. I don't have any facts. I just think that it might be a temporary solution, but maybe not a good one, because then suddenly you think you have solved the problem. You have space for bicycles, so why even trying anything else? It's not sustainable in the long run if you think that bicycling and public transportation should increase, because suddenly you won't be able to coexist. So I think, the very best solution is really being serious about giving space to bicycles that are for bicycles.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Nobody wants to drive a bike in a bus.
Ma küsiksin eesti keeles.
Ma tõlgin, jah.
Et kas nemad on enda töös püüdnud segmenteerida seda autokasutust, et näituseks enne kui mainiti, et Tallinn on väga lame ja hea mitte autokasutamiseks, aga tegelikult on vastupidi, et me oleme välja venitatud nagu librikad ja autokasutusi on erinevaid. Et mina olen ise enda elus läbi teinud nii selle, kui kasutanud siin kesklinnas ratast. Aga ma olen ka käinud näiteks linna ääres kaugemal töörattaga ja ütleme niimoodi, et kindlasti oli kõigile see vastuvõetav sellisel viisil liikuda. Aga samas meie enda Tehnikaülikoolist on teinud uuringu, kus ta selgitas välja, et kui palju on lihtsalt transiitliiklust, mille arvelt on tänavad vaja laiaks hoida, mitte ei saa teha seda näiteks, siis me nägime, et kergliiklejatel on edasi. Teine asi on lihtsalt mugavus, et tullakse, hoitakse 8 tundi, 10 tundi autot kuskil, mis on väga palju ruumi.
90% ajast auto seisab.
Ja et kas sellised?
Basically the question is that have you also studied or differentiated car use? That you mentioned that Tallinn is flat and it would be good for biking, but we have this problem of the shape of Tallinn. I also told you earlier that it's sort of butterfly shaped, and you would need to go through the city center to go from one direction to the other. I'm not sure whether this forces you to use the car, but anyway, that have you studied how much or what kind of different car use there is? It's like transit traffic only through the city center, or if it's actually within like smaller distances.
You mean in Copenhagen? What kind of traffic?
Well, in whatever city we have worked with.
I mean, you probably also have statistic on what types of car trips are being made. Usually it's a ridiculous amount of trips that are done that are very, very short. Like you said, I think in New York there was 25% of the car rides on Manhattan was under a mile.
Yeah.
And I think that you might find a high percentage as well that are really short. You know, just going to the supermarket or local errands, or driving your kid to school even though it's not far but it's unsafe, so you drive them anyway. Or you're going to your work and you drop them off because that's the most convenient. So there's so many trips that could potentially become other types of trips. And I think it's really interesting to know that very well. So when you start looking at where to place the first bicycle lanes, or what kind of network, where do you start? Will you get the most effect? How do we get those people that are easiest to change or easiest to start using a bicycle, for instance?
Et ühesõnaga, ma natuke tõlgin siis, et nad ei said aru, jah, okei. No ma tahtsin veel kommenteerida, et ma arvan, et ta tegelikult tõi välja ka oma esitluses, et reeglina neid autode andmeid on meil ikkagi nagu olemas, et seda statistikat tehakse, et ma usun, et kui me nagu alustaks selle projektiga, siis autode poole pealt meil oleks juba nagu rohkem teadmisi kui inimeste poole pealt, et seda ta mainis ka oma ettekandes, eks, et kui üldse see Jan Keel alustas oma asjadega, siis seda ta nagu nägigi, et nii palju on, ütleme, nagu autosid uuritud, aga seda, mida need inimesed seal tänaval või linnas teevad, seda ja kui palju neid seal on ja kus nad on ja miks nad on, et seda ei olnud uurinud. Ja tegelikult, ma olen vaadanud ka nende uuringute kaustasid, et väga suur osa sellest tööst ongi tegelikult see inimeste loetlemine ja see metodoloogia, mida nad kasutavad, on ikkagi väga palju koostöös kohapealsete partneritega, et seda kõike saavad kohapeal tudengid ära teha, et noh, see kõik ei pea maksma miljoneid, et see on lihtsalt linna enda nii-öelda tahtes ja otsuses kinni, et me võtame selle asja ette. Just I was telling a little bit about your methodology that normally I think when we start you also mentioned in your presentation that the statistics about the cars are usually there, but where you went differently, you started to do the same thing with the people, and that it's that often when you start a project in a city, you also cooperate with the locals who can actually do a lot of this work, so it doesn't have to cost millions and millions, so you can actually do it. It's about just deciding that we will do this and do it in cooperation with the locals.
I think our goal is, of course, to put ourselves out of business, so we're not needed, you know.
That's a good goal.
But I think another thing I came to think about, in Copenhagen they have a quite interesting parking strategy, because of course parking is also one of those, you know, with its weather, its culture, it's what's the last one? I forget. It's dependence on the car, and then it's parking. You know, parking. Copenhagen has had a strategy to slowly take away parking spaces in the city center, not all at once, but slowly one at a time. At the same time, giving options, and giving other options to get into the city. But what they've done is that they say that we want also that it should be easy to find a parking space in the city, and this sounds very contradictory. But what they do is that they have these parking meters, so they raise the price so that there's always a 10 to 15% of free parking spaces in the city. So and they make it really cheaper if you stay short and really expensive if you stay long time. So the philosophy is that if you need your car, if you will buy something big and you can't take any of your bicycles, you should be able to find a parking space in the city. You'll pay a hell of a lot, so you'll stay very short time, and then you'll make space for another one. So again, it's not always either or, but it's trying to find a way where also someone that needs a car, for instance, shall find a place to park. And this has worked quite efficiently.
Ma arvan samamoodi, et tegelikult üks suur muutus tuleks, kui hästi pikaajaline parkimine, mis on tihtilugu tegelikult ainult mugavusega. Et see oleks lihtsalt väga kulukas, aga samas inimesed, kes asja ajamise pärast peaksid saama liigelda ühest linnaotsast teise, kui ma teeksin enda tööd tihti ühistranspordiga, siis ma saaksin võib-olla ainult 1-2 asja pärast ära teha.
No see on nüüd juba ühistranspordi küsimus, see ei peaks nii olema.
Ühistransport oli kindlasti vastavus igasse punkti jõudmiseks. Et palju on ju kirjeldatud eriti inimeste poolt suur sõjamäele minek. Et see võtab väga palju aega näiteks. Aga ühistranspordi igal poole ei saa minna, et kui lõpuks on meil trammid ja rollid, kus on ainult 1-2 inimest.
Ei, no nad võiksid ikkagi nagu, sinna Suur-Sõjamäele ilmselt tänapäeval ka Piritalt juba päris palju inimesi liigub, et ühe bussi võiks ikka käima panna, eks ole, et selles suhtes ma arvan, et seda oleks ka ikkagi võimalik uurida ja kaasajastada, et kindlasti see on üks konkreetne asi, kus meil on nagu Tallinnas kõva arenguruum, et tasuta või mitte, aga paremaks ta peab minema, eks ole.
Aga näituseks parkimine, kus ei ole mitte ainult 15 minutit, mitte ei pea saama kindlasti vana linna või kesklinna autoga, aga kui see parkimisaeg ja jala edasi-tagasi käimine oleks kuidagi korrelatsioonis, siis ma ei näe mingit põhjust näiteks jätta kesklinna äärde autot ja kõndida kesklinna asja.
No vot, siis tulebki see mängu, et sul peab olema mõnus käia, eks sellest ta rääkis ka, et kui sul seal on igav mingi müür ees, eks ole, siis sa ei viitsi seda jalutuskäiku ette võtta, et sul on vaja, et sul oleks seal põnev, eks ole.
Ja ma ka enda kogemust ütles kinnitan, et see on nii, mingi asi ei ole teha näiteks täna meil perega isegi paaritunnised jalutuskäiku, kui sa saad käia seal, kus on sul mida vaadata.
Mary, yeah.
Two questions, because I think this is important for Estonia. One, how did you collect the data? And two, can you tell us about working with the DEP in conjunction to the DOT and the value of collecting or using the idea of lowering the carbon footprint under, you know, sort of the, I guess you could say, the Clinton City Initiative?
Working with the
Department of Environmental Protection.
We worked only for Department of Transportation. We were sort of not even visible, undercover, I would say. This was a DOT project, and they interacted with other departments. But
Janice is very close with the DP, so
yes.
I thought maybe...
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know. They worked, of course, cross-departmental, but I mean, I must stress, we as an office didn't do that. That was Department of Transportation. We helped with ideas, strategies, examples. We did the survey. We did the first survey, and not only Manhattan, where we did it in Bronx. We took like different main streets around all boroughs, and then we taught the DOT how to do the surveys. It's not a hard thing. You actually, you know, you calculate. You just do it systematically, and you do it the same way you did it first time as the next time, so you can start comparing. There is a new book soon in English that explains different methods of measuring public life and pedestrians. It's not a hard thing to do. So now we're definitely not needed in that sense. They do their own surveys, and you can do so many types of surveys. I mean, you can count, you can observe. Sometimes, just like the photographs I showed from Moscow, I don't know if we needed the actual data. They sort of tell the story. Sometimes you need the data to support different issues, and sometimes you find things that are very local that you don't measure other places. Your first question was
how to measure.
How to measure? Yes.
How did you measure? How you yourself? I know the city has their own methods, but I'm just interested when you started doing these cities, how you collected data to create statistical numbers to move policy change.
We start out by, as you said, we always collaborate. We always collaborate, whether it's with a department or a private party or another architect or someone with local knowledge. And the first thing we do is to try to find out we need to put the right question. So we know what to measure to get an answer, because I think the question is sometimes different in different cities. So we'd start out by observing. It's a lot about being out there. We get lots of questions actually about why not just digitalize it. There's many ways of surveying how many pedestrians walk on the street just by measuring with cameras, etc. And I think that's also a good compliment. But just being there in the street, you see so many other things. You see what's happened, how people behave. You see things that wouldn't ever be recognized in a camera, that couldn't be recorded in a camera or actually put into a data spreadsheet, that are really important, valid information. You can interact with people. We mainly observe. But of course you can add a lot of layers to whatever survey you do. And I think, again, first thing is to see what is a question. What is a question we want to have answered? And then you find the methods to answer that. Maybe it's not calculated, maybe it's something different. So,
I think, Eva, what you're doing, you're basically stating the obvious, what the gay architects are doing. But your work, I have followed it and I've heard your presentation for a second time already. It's convincing the policymakers, I think. And it's you're stating the obvious by collecting the data, but everybody knows that biking is healthy, it saves money, it's good for the environment.
I'm not sure everyone knows.
But the way you work, I think that you engage the local activists or different groups, you basically empower them, I think, that there are these crazy bikers everywhere, in every town, in every city, these crazy neighborhood associations, different groups, and crazy expert organizations that are not being heard by the municipality or the city government. So I think, yeah, you come with your well-acknowledged reputation and all this years and years of experience, and you basically empower the local resources. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, my question is related to economic efficiency. In spring we heard from one of the leading Estonian planners that you can't fight with economic aspects of planning. This means that industrial districts have to be in one district, residential quarters have to be in another, and also then the business is somewhere between. And this is the thing you can't fight, and therefore we have nothing to talk about mixing these different modes or types. And at the same time, developers, and I could say that Estonia has been thinking about economic efficiency for the last 20 years, and income returns are the most important things for developers, and they calculate based on this. So how have you managed to solve these economic efficiency issues in other towns, or have you had any such discussions?
Well, I think there are lots of studies that show the absolute opposite of what you just said. That it's much more efficient if you can mix things, because then you can create synergy effects between different, whether it's users or whether it's energy, whether it's people on the streets. I mean, I think there are also quite a lot of studies that I've seen that shows that a mixed-use environment is not only good for environmental issues but also for economy. Recently I went into this site that is called Walk Score. Have anyone heard about you? Yes, I heard about it. Walk Score. You can actually, I think it goes, they have, it's Australia and the US. You can go in and see a neighborhood and see the score you get from 0 to 100. And it basically just measures how close and how many amenities or how many destinations like shops, cafes, etc. do you have within a short proximity. And it's linked to the property developer, because they realize that the higher the score, the better the value of the apartments, the more I can sell my apartment, or more I can get out of my property. And that doesn't even take into account the quality of the walk or the quality of the proximity. It's just the very, very facts, how many different types of amenities, work, cafes, kindergarten, schools, you know, name it, do you have within a walking proximity, and that per se raises the value, which would somehow contradict what you just said that they said is the most economic.
Yeah, maybe I can add that they said that you can't put a shop, apartment, and then, for example, some small craftsmen in one house, because all they have different transport needs, and therefore you can't bring a big
Don't say these stupid things.
They're wrong.
No, I know it's not your opinions. We just need to convince them, but that's why I always stress that we always, when at least people who know a little bit about other countries' experiences, etc., we always need to bring in this financial dimension. And we need to know our figures, and we need to be really accurate, because otherwise we sort of kill the theme. We get this effect that then they don't believe us anymore if we say it wrong once, if you know what I mean.
Ja ma tahtsin öelda seda, et üsna palju saab teha välisruumi kasutamise soodustamiseks ka ilma igasuguste liiklusloendusteta, see tähendab lihtsalt anda inimestele võimalusi seal liikuda. Kui tuletada meelde, et hiljutise Euroopa rohelise pealinna Victoria Kastantsi üks kandvaid ideid, millega ta selle tiitli sai, oli superkvartalid. Ja põhimõtteliselt, et need oleks kvartalid, mille sees oleks liikumine võimalik ilma autot kasutamata. Tegelikult on meil need ka Tallinnas olemas. Ma mõtlen neid samu palju vastandlikult hinnatud neid uuslinnaosi, Mustamäe, Lasnamäe, Õismäe eriti, millest oli ka Taavi ajal hiljuti üsna palju juttu. Need ongi linnaosad, mille sees tegelikult saad sa väga palju asju ära ajada ilma selleta, et sa autot kasutama ei peaks. Juhul, kui lihtsalt oleksid antud liikumisvõimalused kõigile, et ei oleks äärekive, et ei oleks parkivaid autosid igal pool jalus, et ei oleks loike ja kõike muud, loike ja pori ja kõike muud, siis tuleksid ka need samad väikeettevõtted, sinna samas tuleksid ka teenindusasutused, tuleksid poed ja ütleme nii, et üsna palju tuhandeid sõidukilomeetrid jääks päevas vähemaks.
Mul oleks üks küsimus üle, et õigemini kaks, et ma tahaksin üles kutsuda, et mitte siin vastandada jälle ja sõimata arendajaid. Et nii kaua kui arhitektid raha võtavad, siis ei ole vaja ka teistele ninadele visata, et nad tahaksid enda tulemust maksimeerida. Aga teine asi, et meil on siin ka riigi esindaja, et selline küsimus, et kui me tahaksime, siin tehti ettepanek, et võiks olla rohkem väikeäridele ja nii edasi ruumi tekkida, et või on ka tegelikult linnaruumis situatsioone, kus ei ole võimalik olemasolevat tänavat teistmoodi kasutades seda ruumi kergliiklejatele ja nii edasi tekitada, vaid tahes tahtmata hakatakse seda siis mingi kinnistu omaniku käest nõudma. Et kas ei oleks võimalik hoopis, me teame, see küll solgiti ära, et oli selline asi, et kui olid mingid looduskaitsealad kellegil ja seal taheti loodust edasi kaitsta, siis pakuti teisi varasid vastu mujal. Et kas ei oleks näituseks nende väikeäride ja selliste ruumide tekitamiseks ka selline võimalus, need on tahes tahtmata seotud suurema riskiga ja nii edasi ja kui omanikule seda sundida peale, see tekitab vastuseisu. Aga samas, kui mingi kompensatsiooni asendusmehhanism tekitada, et kui siin on nii ja nii palju sellise funktsiooniga ruume, siis kuskil teises kohas on sul võimalik vastu saada.
Vabandust, mina küsimus teie käest, et miks on vaja maade vahetust, kui ma tahan lapse käruga tänavat sõita? Miks see solvab arendaja?
Võib-olla ma kommenteeriks, et ma arvan tegelikult, et me oleme selle eelneva jutuga üritanud tõestada seda, et see klient tuleb sellele ettevõtjale nende muudatuste läbi, millest me siin räägime. Inimesed tulevad tänavale, siis tekib ka nagu tarbija sellele väikeettevõtjale. See on tegelikult see vahend, mida me kasutame, mitte me ei reguleeri nagu ütleme su kinnistu. Põhimõtteliselt on ju linnal ka see õigus, eks ole, anda kasutuslubasid välja üheks või teiseks tegevuseks igatahes, eks ole, aga keegi, mina isiklikult ei usu nagu selles mõttes nagu turu reguleerimisesse, et pigem ma usun sellesse nii-öelda kutsumisesse tänavale just nimelt, millest kogu Ewa töö räägib, eks ole, et pigem mitte regulatsioonid, pigem ikkagi see, et me kutsume selle inimese sinna tänavale ja me usume, et siis ta tahab seal ka midagi teha, eks ole, ja seda lihtsam on siis ettevõtjal pakkuda talle seal kas kohvi, kingsepa teenust, mida iganes, eks ole, lastehoidu, eks ole, et
ma vist ei olnud aru saada, et ma tahtsin seda öelda, et sa võid ju tänavad ja ruumi teha, et inimesed tahaksid sinna tulla, aga kui vastavaid ruume ei ole seal, et
sa mõtled, kui ei ole äripindasid selles suhtes? Põhimõtteliselt on ju võimalik kasutusotstarbeid ikkagi nagu muuta, et ja meil ikkagi ka ehitatakse veel päris palju ka uusi hooneid juurde, et noh, ma olen täiesti nõus sellega, et teatud kohtades meil ongi äripindade puudus Tallinnas ja meie tänavatasandi äripindade hinnad on täiesti veidralt kõrged, nad on võrreldavad Londoni omadega, eks ole, noh, mis nii-öelda klientide hulga võrdlusest me räägime, eks ole, et absoluutselt absurd ja minu meelest see on ka üks linna kohuseid, et oma ikkagi planeeringute ja kasutuslubade kaudu seda nagu noh, küll nii palju kui võimalik nagu reguleerida, et kui tulevad uued planeeringud, siis seal tänavatasanditel ikkagi oleks asjalikku, me näeme ette seal tänavaelu, et seal oleks ka võimalik neid teenindus- või äripindu nagu olla, et noh, maadevahetus ma ei oska öelda, kas seda peab ilmselt pikemalt mõtlema.
Ma tahtsin enda jutuga seda ütelda, et kui täna on praktika ja sa ka kordasid seda, et keegi käseb sul teha teatud funktsiooniga ruume, aga samas sellele omanikule tundub see näiteks määramatu või suure riskiga, aga tema kannab üksinda selle taga.
Ta võib ära müüa oma kinnisvara muidu ja osta mingi teise.
Järgmisena pakutakse mingi põllu peale ja
tänapäeval rohkem see, et nad hoiavad seda tühjana lihtsalt.
Aga samas oleks ju...
Jaa, vaata, ma arvan, miks nad hoiavad tühjana, siin me jõuame nagu asja pointini, nad küsivad liiga kallist hinda. Et jällegi, kui me nii-öelda linna poolt loome need võimalused, kui me loome selle infrastruktuuri, mis need inimesed ehk need kliendid sinna tooks, siis ma arvan, et tekib ka seda nagu suurem nõudlus ja seda parem oleks tal see koht ikkagi välja rentida.
Ma tahan öelda, et ei ole liiga kallid siin, sellepärast, et kui te vaataksite nende pindade ühiku hinda rendis ja vaataksite seda tasuvusaega, siis isegi Eesti suured monopolid põlgavad ära sellised ärid nii pika tasuvusajaga. Ei saa ütelda, nad liiga kõrged.
Ma arvan, me nüüd, me vist laskume liiga...
No, it's a very interesting discussion and just for Ewa to understand, it was about real estate prices. It was that in Tallinn we have too few street level business, small business premises and it's not fair to force businesses there because it's too big of financial risk. I totally disagree because I think the small businesses and public space taken over by active people and by all people of different ages, nationalities, whatever, it's one sign of the society is transforming. We are moving more towards local businesses. We are moving towards living more locally, not taking your child to the kindergarten on the other side of the city and stuff like that. We are like demanding. We are more happy when we're living more locally. This is what Ewa has proved, and this is where the society is going. The era of big shopping centers, well, the shopping center developers, they haven't realized it, but I think it's slowly coming to an end. Like, this is not making us happy anymore.
It's probably about the use of time. I think it's still too easy for us to reach them, probably. Too few congestions.
Et võib-olla ka sellest, et on see tingitud, et me oleme väga kaua ju arenenud, mis nüüd väga kaua, aga ütleme viimased 10 aastat, kui mitte rohkem arenenud just nimelt nende suurte ostukeskuste suunas, mis on ümber linna, mis nõuavad jällegi auto kasutamist, et sinna kohale jõuda ja ka lisaparkimisplatsi seal, nii et see ongi niisugune maa üsna ebaotstarbekas kasutus. Et Tallinnas tervikuna on rohkem parkimisplatsid all kui terve Mustamäe linnaosa pindala. Aga sealt on väga raske muidugi tuua uuesti seda äri tänavatele tagasi, siis tõesti esialgu see ei ole tasuv, nad ei näe seda tasuvust, on harjutud mõtlema teistmoodi ja see mõtteviisi muutmine on küllaltki raske. Kui vaadata ka neid tänavaid, mis praegu on tehtud, kas või siin Soo tänav või Telliskivi tänav tulevikus või ma küll ei tea, missugune ta küll välja saab nägema, aga tehnika samamoodi ja siis tegelikult seal on küll ruum on nüüd olemas, aga kui vaadata natukese detailsemalt, et ei ole harjutud ka tänavaruumi tervikuna planeerima, projekteerima, et me peame uuesti tulema selle mõtteviisi juurde ka tagasi, et tänav on avalik ruum, mis tahab terviklikku projekteerimist, planeerimist. Et mitte ainult ei projekteerita eraldi auto liikluseks määratud osa ja siis ülejäänud jääb siis nagu jalakäijate juurde või jalakäijate jaoks, vaid seda tehakse tervikuna kõikide vajalike elementidega ja siis tuleb elu tänavale tagasi ilma selleta mitte. ja see võimaldab ka teha sidusaid jalakäiguks või ka rattasõiduks sobivaid marsruute, võrgustikke ja siis tuleb ka võib-olla vanaema ja lapselaps tänavale.
Ma mõtlesin veel, I think Ewa Westermark'i has this theory about these soft edges, that exactly what you also stressed about this eye-level view, that we need to put more focus into this, and this is exactly the question of these street-level business spaces. It's about the entrances, it's about the access to them, it's about having a bit of greenery there and to working thoroughly with this. I think in the old town we have the examples of this. For example, also we have in Telliskivi Street, I think Telliskivi loomelinnak is one of the places where they actually are dealing with this actively now, and it does work, and it's just we need to actually still have the knowledge. I think Teele is saying that somewhere in our guts we feel it, but I think it's the great thing about what Keele Architects is doing. They are also able to articulate this obvious thing and show it with examples, because I'm not convinced that everyone knows this yet.
I mean, soft edge, I think I showed some images, but maybe I talked more about it as detailing and creating a nice environment in the street. But of course, the actual activities, public life doesn't pop up in the middle of a space. I mean, if we look out here, maybe one reason why it's not crowded with people is that there's not a lot of activity going on around it. I mean, public life is born at the edge. It's born in the interaction between what's inside the functions and how that interacts with the public spaces. And we have, for instance, measured different types of streets and how much activity, different types of fine grain and different types of activities in the inside of the buildings, how that affect. And we saw that 7 times more activity happens when you have an environment with many doors, entrances, like a shop every 5 meters, for instance, compared to a street or a space where there is only one door into shopping mall. There's 7 times more activities in that street because it's a different environment. So of course, it's never about looking at the street only, but seeing how the functions and the buildings interact with the space. It's absolutely crucial. And then I think we can spend another few days talking about shopping malls and how to deal with that. That's a whole chapter. But I would like to say one thing about it, though. I mean, we can see some trends, like you say, that shopping malls have a harder time, not everywhere in the world, but in some places in the world. There is quite a few interesting examples of how to deal with shopping center culture. For instance, a lot of Danish cities, especially smaller cities, they have decided that they're not allowed to build more shopping centers, unless they are in the city center. But then also an interesting aspect comes, I mean, how does a network work? Sometimes a shopping center is within walking distance, but not directly connected to the walking street, and then it fails. Then all people stay in the shopping center. So suddenly it's so delicate how to make that interaction happen. But the second thing, I think we also have to realize that shopping centers that do exist are meeting places for people today. They're just really appalling environments, outside especially, maybe really nice inside. I think we have to acknowledge that and try to also work with those environments and connect it and make it possible to bike there, or make it possible to stay outside, and trying as hard as possible to integrate it into the network, because it's a fact. But I don't think we should maybe worsen the situation.
Good answer.
Okay.
I think, are there any more questions? One more question. I think we need to get outside also. Mary?
No, I was just going to add to the economy of the retail space, because since the bike in New York got put in, we have to pay to use the bike. And in the beginning, nobody wanted to pay $100 a year to use the bike. The public was resistant. But after the bikes were parked, about 4 days later, everyone started using them, including the tourists. and streets that had retail that didn't have a lot of street access, all of a sudden had access. So we've actually improved areas that didn't have before street traffic, now ended up having tourists and street traffic, and improved the small business factor outside the main things. So we didn't bring that up, and I thought that was important.
There's this great report called Measuring the Streets that look at not only, I mean, I showed some very specifics about Times Square, measuring before and after, but they measure also the effects of the streets where they put the separated bicycle lanes, what's the effect on retail, what's the effect on many different parameters. So measuring the streets, measuring the street. I could send a link if someone's interested. Really interesting reading.
Well, I have to say again, thank you, Eva, for your... Oh yeah, for like a little end funny thing. No, it's not funny, it's serious business. But there's been a really good, well, I haven't seen it, but I've seen the trailer. So there's been a film made about Jan Gehl's work called The Human Scale. And I just also wanted to stress that the same director who made this film, he also made this Citizen Speed Bogota, which we are showing in Erik's cinema next Tuesday on the 15th in Kino Sõprus, et minge vaadake, see on ka põnev film, aga vaatame lõpetuseks 7-minutilist väikest klippi sellest Human Scale filmist.
And it's an independent filmmaker, so it's not
a promotion film. Yeah.
The megacity is a reality. And it looks a lot like the visions of science fiction films. Gigacities are soon to be. In the midst of this cold, bleak vision of the future, we have the human being. It is personal, warm, social.
Nobody knew that the way we build cities had any influence on lifestyles and people's life.
I think we made a lot of the same mistakes as the Western countries have made.
We're living in a world that's choked with traffic everywhere, where we've made our own human living environment deadly for people.
Dhaka is the fastest growing city in the world. 500,000 people move here from the countryside every year. A group of activists have translated Jan Gehl's books. They have introduced his methods of guiding pedestrians, rickshaws and public life to inspire a different approach to planning.
The policies and the planning, when it comes from the top, it never understands the very aspiration of the people. So when we're doing it, you have encompassed only the rich people of upper middle income people. Rest of the people who actually dominated in terms of number have been left out. So unfortunately, if you don't encompass everybody into your planning and understanding of transportation, housing, you actually walking towards a chaos created by yourself.
As I see the scenery, city planning has been going on for quite a number of years with a rather incomplete toolbox. We always did the old cities in 5 km/h scale. That means that when you move at 5 km/h walking, you can see the people, you are sort of squeezed a little bit together, and it's a very sensual and interesting world. You can see all the details. There are colors, there are smells, there are acoustics which are very interesting. If you go to a modern housing area, it suddenly makes sense that much of the stuff in the suburbs are made so that the cars would be happy when going 60 kilometers an hour. That's a completely different scale from the scale of the walking man.
100 years ago or 60 years ago, the car was new. It held the promise for the future. It seemed to be the way of progress. Now we've grown up. We've seen what a fully built-out automobile world is like, and we fail.
In 2007, the methods of studying people and public life were taken to New York.
The DOT had never measured pedestrian traffic. They had never, they'd only been counting cars. They had no quantitative tools for measuring, the pedestrian experience. And that's what Ian helped us do. Get the baseline data, set some targets. Now let's plan our street to meet them.
90% of the roadway in Times Square was allocated to cars and only 10% to people. And yet 90% of the people who use the space were pedestrians and only 10% cars. So we needed to change the math.
What? Times Square has no square. 89% of it isn't even a square. That's very simple to understand, and people can react to it and demand no place to sit along Broadway. Everyone understands that's a real shame. So we were able to, I think, with some very simple observations, frame them in a political context that allowed everyone to say, you know what, this street is underperforming. This is not worthy of a world-class city.
You know what? My idea of a city has just been transformed. My idea of a city street is now different than it was before. And that's precisely what America needs right now, because we have had this love affair with the automobile, for 100 years, and the oil's running out, and people want a different lifestyle.
If you see life, if you see how it grows, then when you grow up, you will take care of lives of others. When we make a city into a place where you don't walk, your kids don't walk, you are raising generations. When they grow up, they will be much human.
We have 3.6 billion people living in cities today, 50% of the world's population. That's going to rise to 6.5 billion people by 2050. We're almost going to have to double the urban capacity of our cities in 40 years. And if we start to address how we make people happy, how we make our cities financially viable, the only way is to look at cities very carefully and understand how they work. We haven't got the time or money to build the infrastructure we'll need for the capacity we need in the next 50 years. So we'll have to look at our city and start to think about how do you do more with less.
So where does the question come in? What is the definition of modernity? What is the definition of being modern? Now we have started the journey. Now we are in the middle of the bridge. Now I can set up my journey. Okay, which way I can go?